A dark power is rising. It's a power that comes to us from distant lands, lands wreathed in shadow. This power is unknowable, hidden, yet evident, and really, really scary. It comes for our most sacred platforms. It will use our own weapons against us. We will try to fight back, but ultimately its shitposting ability will prove far too strong. This power is the Twitter accounts of CCP officials and their affiliates. G'day, cunts. Everyone hates a centrist, don't they? So they should. But I get why the centrists do it. It's low-hanging fruit to make both sides bad observations, which are observations that are often very wrong, but that doesn't mean that doing so doesn't leave you feeling smug as fuck. And today, I get to be that guy. 'Cause, well, fuck the CCP. They're responsible for many atrocities, they are certainly not left-wing, and while not currently imperial in the traditional sense, certainly they seek to impose their will on loads of people who do not want a bar of it, and rightly so. That said though, these state powers lining up to level criticism can go and get fucked too, because despite there being some apparent curbs to their power, it hasn't stopped them also committing things like war crimes currently and throughout history. For example, as many will be aware, current lump in charge of making Australia the 51st State of the Union, Scott I don't hold a hose mate Morrison, demanded an apology when Lu Chang-chow, I think I said that right, tweeted out this drawn picture of an Australian soldier holding and slitting the throat of a kid who is in turn holding a lamb. The picture was tweeted in response to reports of war crimes, including the slitting of throats of 2 young Afghan boys by Australian soldiers, which were included within a report made by the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force, ADF. Now, Scotty, who has remained measured in statements regarding the report itself, well, he was pants-shittingly mad about this tweet, calling it offensive and repugnant, and of course the army of so-called patriots was soon flooding social media to back him up. I will summarise thusly. I will not hear allegations of this type made against our diggers from the goddamn CCP. Remember Tiananmen Square? It's time we stood up to communism. Now look, this tweet is of course propaganda. The CCP does not give a flying fuck about Afghanistan or its children. Zhao and co are tweeting this out because they want to make Australian forces look bad in the eyes of people around the world. But the thing is that they're right in their premise, even if not their motivations and conclusions. There's been a veritable flood of evidence of Australian soldiers committing war crimes in Afghanistan, which, as history shows, is a far too common practice for Australian soldiers to be involved in. At least someone should be bringing attention to this shit, and, I wouldn't let the CCP excuse its atrocities by citing those committed by others. Why on earth should anyone be okay with Australians doing the same? Although, whoops, I can just about hear the dullards typing already. The difference in this case is that those few bad apples will be exposed and removed. This is not the Australian way, and we will make sure it isn't repeated. So, look, first of all, history aside, the report itself mentions how the problem stems from a culture within Special Forces. Just because those discrete incidents that we do know about have not been committed by all soldiers doesn't mean you get to ignore that it's a set of practices and norms that creates the mentalities that allow this sort of thing to happen. But furthermore, are you sure that the bad apples that you'd like to pin all of the blame upon will actually be removed? So far, of the 25 soldiers listed in the latest report, 19 have been referred to this new thing called the Office of Special Investigations, and the honours of said soldiers are under review. That's it. No reports of discipline, certainly no discharges as of yet, or, the filing of criminal charges. Now, can I also point out that this new report was carried out after another report by a sociologist that was completed in 2016, meaning that for 4 years at least, the higher-ups have been aware of the problem, and that not a single soldier has yet been discharged. And this is by no means how far back this particular load of bullshit goes. Here's Australian troops flying a swastika flag in 2007. Here's Australian troops drinking beer from a prosthetic leg taken from an Afghan fighter in 2009. Completely unacceptable stuff, but it's only now, after years and years of investigation, footage revealing not just these offensive practices but also Australian troops deliberately murdering civilians, that of these 25 soldiers named, 19 have been referred, and according to the Chief of the Army, 13 soldiers might be discharged. So, yeah, bad apples arguments mean fuck all if all we do is investigate. My gosh, we need to do better on that one. But also I think more importantly, these positions ignore that shit like this doesn't happen in a vacuum. To pretend like the problem would go away simply because we identify and punish war criminals within ADF ranks is irresponsible and woefully inadequate. Which leads me to a far broader point. One thing the CCP is clearly trying to communicate is the fact that it's not the CCP that is currently embroiled in a 20-year-long war, which is just one of those being fought right now by that which was once called the Coalition of the Willing by some Texan piece of shit. These conflicts are just the latest in a long line of wars fought by a cluster of Western powers, wars that inevitably we eventually reflect on and go, well, that wasn't fucking worth it, was it? This war, at current count, has resulted in the deaths of 170,000 civilians, 2.2 million Afghan refugees, and a massively increased drug trade. And for what? The Taliban, that boogeyman that they convinced us all was the epitome of evil, a clear and present threat to not only Afghans but also the West and therefore in desperate need of permanent erasure from the face of the planet, is now in peace talks with the Afghani government. Really though, I'm glad Obama got his photo op. So, yep. Just because you need to hear me say it again, fuck the CCP. But equally, fuck Western imperialism and Australia's continued involvement in it. You know, there's probably a good argument that in the current state of play, the biggest threat to people around the world is the US and its allies. You know, it's the only superpower left, and it's involved in all the cause of all the major conflicts in the world right now. I'm not saying that can't change. I'm not making an argument for the rise of China. I am making an argument for none of them. To bring it back to the point of this video though, and at the very fucking least, if Scott Morrison and his hordes of sycophantic navel gazers getting their opinions from the bullshit they fed us about Australian exceptionalism in school and supplemented by a steady diet of the Murdoch press want to not be on the receiving end of political attacks from the CCP that are based in fact, they need to demand that Australia and its armed forces start to be what they seem to think it is. If you want to be the good guys, you need to actually be that, not just insist that you are, because people at home, a tiny minority in global terms by the way, have it better than people in the countries you invade, exploit, or are in a struggle for power with. Laters.